I have exactly 42 seconds to bring the world's most amazing panel up on this stage. And so I'm going to introduce them one at a time, and I'll get out the way here so they can actually move to their seats. First, coming in from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, one of my earliest partners in crime in this whole business. When I first met her, she was in lovely North Carolina working for Accelerate America, and she accelerated so fast she ended up in Philadelphia. This is Emily Yates from SEPTA. Then we got Thomas Bartholomew coming in from our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., the dude who is literally trying to figure out how to electrify everything in a city that is in a state of flux right now. And he's the one guy who's got the flux capacitor working. Then Morteza Farjan from Build America Bureau at the U.S. Department of Transportation. As I said, if you are a city or if you are a partner looking to transform your city and you got to figure out how to finance it, he's the guy. Make sure you have that conversation. And finally, Boris Gazel from BMW i Ventures. Essentially, guys, if you want to figure out how a company is working with all these partners and collaborators and where the private sector interest is, he's the right guy to talk to. So make sure you have that conversation. All right, we'll get you all settled there real quick. Guys, are you guys cool with the chairs? Need to? All right, cool. We're going to start this panel 45 seconds early because here's the other. It's not a secret. If you actually ask Cormac, he'll tell you. We purposely make these panels much too short. Every single person in this room is probably going to have a question, and that's the design of the whole thing. We want you to hunt these four folks down because they're going to say some nugget of brilliance up here, and you're going to say, I need to know more about that. And before we actually get into your intros, just thumbs up, thumbs down. Will you all be around the rest of the day to talk to all these wonderful humans? Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a clean sweep. So put down your notes, who you want to chase after and get a comment from, and we'll do that. Ma'am, we'll start with you on the end. We'll just get everybody a chance to introduce themselves and kind of what's the one thing that you want to do to change the world here at the conference?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Emily Yates. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at SEPTA, which is short for the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority. We are headquartered in Philadelphia, but serve the 4 surrounding counties and connect to transit in New Jersey and Delaware. We are the 5th largest transportation authority and cover the most modes of transit. Alongside Boston, we have 7 different modes of transportation. And I oversee, how I like to describe it, is the departments that are collaborative and cross-departmental, right? I oversee data, policy, and analytics, sustainability, as well as what I like to say is pure innovation, where we pilot technologies and work to ideate and rapidly deploy them. And I would say the one thing I would like to accomplish today, I don't like being first, because I like to hear what my other peers are saying. I just want to meet as many people, and my goal is to bring the most innovation to SEPTA, which is one of the oldest transportation authorities in the U.S. I'm always looking for people to partner with and who are ready to do kind of R&D partnerships and really test things out in a very interesting and diverse community.
Thomas, over to you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, Thomas Bartholomew with the Washington, D.C. Department of Energy and Environment. So Washington, D.C. is sort of a unique place. It's obviously the nation's capital. It's also a singular jurisdiction. There's only one local government in D.C. So instead of state, county, local, we just have one. So I work for the State Energy Office for Washington, D.C., and we're trying to decarbonize the district's energy system. So both transportation and the power systems that serve the district. I think that the thing I'm most interested in doing today, and maybe for the rest of the year, is to figure out how we can make electrified transportation work within the District of Columbia, which has a electric grid that was designed 100 years ago, and a streetscape that was designed 250 years ago, and all of the different challenges that come with that. And so I'm sure that a lot of the folks in this room have answers to at least some of those questions, so interested in talking with you about that.
Murteza, over to you, sir.
Morteza Farajian, Executive Director of Build America Bureau. Bureau is the one-stop shop within U.S. Department of Transportation that acts like a small bank that has over $100 billion to lend. So that's what we do. We try to find good projects, help them finance their projects, move forward faster, and in many cases, even build a project cheaper by finding innovative ways of getting it done. And to me, innovation is not something very complicated. I'm just trying to explain to people that there are simple ways that we can innovate, think outside the box, get some of these things done in a more efficient, effective way. And our system is so inefficient that it's not hard at all to find efficiencies. It just look under the rug and you find something. So that's what I love to do. Prior to joining Bureau, I was director of P3 office, Public-Private Partnership Office in Virginia. I was the #1 borrower of this program. So there was a point that they just told me that that's enough. Best way to get rid of you is to just bring you over and hire you, and that's when I started working for the Bureau.
Love that. Sir.
Boris Güzel, partner with BMW iVentures, which is BMW's fully independent venture capital fund based out of Silicon Valley. I'm here today to hopefully make new friends, learn from the participants. It takes a village to move things forward, and I cannot wait to learn more about how we could make all of these turn into reality altogether.
Sweet. Well, the way we'll get this thing moving, because again, I could literally spend the entire day just kibitzing with these folks, and we would all have a wonderful day, but y'all wouldn't get a chance to get your questions answered from them out on the floor of the conference. And quite frankly, the panel after us is amazing. So we want to do this as quickly as possible. So we'll pose some questions to the group, generally to 2 of them at a time, with the idea being that if you want to hear whoever didn't get asked that question, their answer to that question, grab them on the floor, and that way we can get as many things done as we can. One of the other fun things about being a speaker here, and if you are not a speaker yet, go back and see Cormac for the next iteration, and you get to have these calls and these dinners with people like this. And you get to spend about 2 hours for every half hour that you're up on the stage. And I learned so much in those calls that I get giddy just for the chance to do that bit. And one of the first things that I want to throw out to the audience, and we'll start with Thomas and Emily, when you're thinking about your projects, you're both talking about innovative projects, be they EV, be they transportation-centric. What are some of the big factors that you look at when you prioritize which ones make it to the top of your priority list versus which ones just get kind of thrown into the, well, if it works within the main operations budget, we'll figure it out type thing? And Thomas, we'll start with you on that one.
Thanks. Yeah, so I mean, the top of the list to me is things that I'm pretty sure we can execute on, I think. So, you know, it has funding. It sort of fits within, you know, what's realistic, what's possible in the city. And it sort of meets the goals that we have. So those kind of 3. I think if you're outside looking in at what a city government, a state government, you know, everybody's doing, it's a good idea to try to look at like the plans that we all have. You know, I think that those documents can seem kind of boring, but an incredible amount of work goes into that. And if you're looking at that, if you see like the plans and you see like, hey, you know, Washington D.C. is looking to do this, I think that's going to tell you a lot about, you know, what the priorities are, what the goals are. So, and I think for us, you know, one of the really big things, and again, is decarbonization. What's going to get us the most greenhouse gases reduced from the project, and then how does that sort of support, particularly, you know, residents in the district that don't, you know, have as many resources. In general, like for electric vehicles, I know that folks, you know, in our wealthier neighborhoods are generally able to make that happen for themselves if they want to buy a Tesla. We're also interested in seeing how we can get electrified transportation to support our lower income residents. So it's kind of trying to meet those priorities and looking at what we do, and I think that's what jumps to the top of the list.
I thought your piece you put on LinkedIn last week about, you know, the percentage of cars that are actually within 250 feet of a electrical source to charge was sort of talked a little bit to that. And I know, Emily, that's one of the things you'd sort of talked about in some of our conversations with respect to what is the accessibility of a lot of this to real humans who have to live in your city.
Absolutely, and I would just echo what Thomas said. Those are a lot of our considerations as well. SEPTA just launched a couple of years ago, so maybe not just, but a new strategic plan that shifts our focus from being a commuter service to really looking at how we can transition to a lifestyle transit network, right? We saw COVID come, and a lot of people are working from home, so our riders were not demanding our services at 9 and 5, but really throughout the day. And we started to look deeper into the statistics of who's riding our services. 2/3 of our riders are women making multiple stops, oftentimes with children and devices to pull groceries and whatnot. 60% of our riders are people of color, and 40% are people who live at or below federal poverty level. So we really try to focus on the equity lens because that's really impactful to our riders. Other criteria besides aligning with the goals that were set out in our SEPTA Forward are, for me personally, how can we affect systems change? You know, a lot of things aren't really sustainable unless you're looking at the broader picture. And SEPTA is one of the largest employers in Philadelphia region, which drives kind of is the economic hub of the state of Pennsylvania. So when I'm looking for projects like transitioning to zero-emission vehicles, I'm looking at things like, is there a workforce component to it where we can train, upskill, reskill, and provide more economic mobility for our riders as well? Can we improve the quality of air in these communities? A lot of our depots are located in lower income communities. And so really thinking about how do we have a broader impact, not just on the services we can provide, but on the people who are riding and who live in our communities. And so we're looking at a variety of projects, not only transitioning our fleet to zero emission by 2040, and how can we do that creatively, thinking of things like inflation costs, supply chain issues, workforce challenges, but also how can we leverage what we have currently to improve the air quality by identifying green zones where our buses transition to battery electric for a short distance, but hey, that's better than nothing. And a variety of those things, and then starting to look at also the aging population that's coming, as the silver tsunami is going to hit soon. How can we start to think through things like that? And those are how I prioritize. Risk is always something that's going to be part of innovation. So what is palatable to my peers is also something that I take into consideration, and how can we manage that?
I love how you bring the risk into the conversation, because Morteza and Boris, I know that you guys frequently get hit by people like Thomas, like Emily, like me, when I'm in Little Parkville, Missouri, to say, hey, I've got some really great ideas and projects, and I need some money to figure out how to do that within my budget over a certain amount of time. So we'll start with you, Morteza. How do you sort of, when you have that conversation with the city, and I know you've had it with a few cities in the area recently, what do you bring into that conversation? What are you looking for from those cities to get to a yes?
I can look at it from different angles. First angle is I want to understand what the city has and how they're approaching different projects. Because as I said earlier, there's always a way to get the project done, maybe slightly in a different way, but save some money. The typical example I always use is that a lot of public entities, they decide to phase their projects. And that's very inefficient, because every time you phase your project for phase 2, you pay for construction cost escalation, a lot of overhead, mobilization, demobilization, procurement cost, and it's also sucking resources from the rest of your projects, because you have to go through procurement twice. You have to administer 2 different contracts. If you find a way to bundle it and get it done all in one phase and take advantage of economy of scale and all of those savings, it's a much better approach. But many cities, they don't know how to get it built in one phase because they don't have money. And trying to explain to them that, okay, you finance it the same way that you're going to pay for phase 2, use that money. Yes, it's money in the future. You don't have it today. But if this is an important project for you, if you know that money is going to be there to pay for in the future, let's talk about financing it. And then all the savings that comes with it. And once they see 1 or 2 projects being built and done that way, and they see the savings, all of a sudden the conversation starts happening on other projects. But the real issue is that many cities that I have talked to, it looks like that they do not have the right resources, internally or externally, to think outside the box, to think in a different way. They do have really good engineers, very good accountants, but when it comes to business mindsets, when it comes to financial mindsets, that's where I think we need to build some capacity for them. That's what we are doing through multiple programs we have at Build America Bureau. One of them is called Regional Infrastructure Accelerator Program. So we have gone through 2 rounds. We have created 10 of those throughout the United States. We are about to announce round 3 winners, which I believe we are going to make that announcement within the next week or 2. There's $24 million that we are going to allocate to this new regional infrastructure accelerators to do exactly what I just mentioned. We want them to have resources, to hire people, to hire advisors, to think outside the box and make some of those things happen. And that's really the seed funding, because once these projects are ready, once they can put a good business model together, they can come to us and we can finance it for them. One of the main benefits of our loans, beside the low interest rate and other benefits that they get, is the fact that we can structure the loan in a way that up to 5 years after project completion, there is no payment. So for a lot of projects that you need to build it, because it's a new concept, it's something that you need to build and you need to operate it and you need to go through that ramp up to generate revenue, I think that's something very unique that once people start thinking about it that way, it makes a lot of sense to them.
And how do you guys see it in Silicon Valley? How do you guys see sort of these opportunities?
Sure. I think the reality is right now we're seeing massive trends that are creating significant challenges. We've seen this all firsthand during the age of COVID. So economics now shifting towards resilience. It is becoming more and more clear that we need to have necessary capabilities specifically around manufacturing, which is something that got ignored in this country for such a long period of time. So when we look around the whole trend towards electrification, we know that 40% of electric vehicle cost is batteries. Today, the whole world market is dominated by a handful number of players, and none of them is actually based out of the States or Europe. And when you look at actually the real innovation of invention of lithium-ion batteries, we are sitting in Texas. This got invented in some of the most impressive colleges here in Texas. This got commercialized by a company named A123 Batteries. And as we speak, United States does not play a single role in the manufacturing of batteries. So we view this as an opportunity and invest in a company called Our Next Energy, which is based out of Novi, Michigan. The main team came from Apple. Prior to Apple, they were working for A123 Batteries. Initially, we made the investment with the whole larger vision of creating a battery company out of the States, given their unique capabilities and know-how. Over time, what we've realized is that those cells that are powering your cars could also power your utilities. So now Our Next Energy is working on a bunch of projects closely with a lot of cities out there. They recently announced a West Virginia project working with Berkshire Hathaway Energy. So we are seeing massive challenges, but therein lies unique opportunities to build something a lot more interesting and valuable financially and strategically.
Well, I know one community that's done sort of, innovative responses to challenges was the Washington, D.C. area. And so I'll throw this over to Thomas and Morteza now, talking a little bit about that wonderful corridor between the heart of Washington, D.C., where I used to work when I was in the Pentagon, and then out west by Dulles Airport. And obviously, you've got folks from 2 states converging on that corridor. You've got a massive number of tech companies. You've got a massive number of big thinkers working in that line. And Morteza, I know you had a bit to do with the development of that corridor, so we'll have you start a little bit about sort of how that process of melding together the funding for a big project, but having the vision to do that. And Thomas, if you could talk maybe a little bit to what you see that generating, not just for the city, but also for the region in which you live. Morteza, we'll start with you on that.
Sure. So that's part of my previous life with Virginia Department of Transportation. When I was with P3 office, that corridor you're talking about, it's a very congested corridor. We studied different options, and it's interesting because you also have 3 different counties with 3 different views. You have Arlington, which sees everything as transit. You have Fairfax County, which is kind of in the mix, and then you have another county, Prince Williams County, which wanted highway expansion. So how do you bring all of these stakeholders to table? How do you start talking about which one of those options, whether it's metro extension, more free lanes or toll lanes, or a couple of other options that we were studying, should be selected? Well, it was interesting because we created an advisory stakeholder group, and we came up with a multimodal approach, which incorporates a lot of technology elements into that solution as well. So it's building new highway lanes, but those lanes are going to be dynamically priced, free for transit, free for high occupancy vehicles. The revenue is going to be used to pay for design and construction of the facility, as well as subsidization for transit buses, as well as paying for some of these other upgrades that we have, such as building a pedestrian lane on every single one of those bridges, a biking lane, and the ITS that went to that project that is not only helping these new lanes, but the entire corridor. We were talking about it the other day that I think that's the most advanced corridor right now in US based on what Cintra has put in that project. But that's one example that something big, politically challenging, financially challenging happened because some folks got together. It took about 5 years, so don't think that it was easy to just get it on their contract. It was a lot of work, but eventually it happened, and it's a successful project, open to traffic on time, on budget, after 5 years, 5.5 years of construction. Despite supply chain issues, despite what happened in COVID, still open to traffic on time. And it's functioning exactly as it intended to function. So to me, that's a great example that how that efficiency was created, especially through alternative delivery model that we use, because Virginia DOT actually received a $600 million check from project developer that we cashed day one, and I always joke about it, I had to call our treasurer and make sure that he knew that $600 million is going to go to our account, deposited, because it had never happened in the history of Commonwealth of Virginia that somebody would pay us $600 million overnight. But that's one good example that some of these challenging, complicated projects can still be done if the right people get together, if they're patient, if they work with the stakeholders, take the right steps. And I think that can be an example that others can follow.
And it's right there in your backyard, Thomas. I know that you've benefited from that, and I think you've used that same approach internally in DC, yeah?
Yeah, well, I took the metro out to Dulles to get here, so that was great. I think there are definitely times like where we in DC have to think about ourselves in the region, and the Washington DC metro region has, like, I think if you extend it out to Baltimore, it has like 9 million people. It's one of the largest metros in the country. And there's just an incredible amount of people and money and business moving around all the time. And one of the things we've actually seen since COVID is that people are driving a lot more than they ever did. And there's actually more traffic somehow in DC, the DC region, which I don't even know how that was possible, but there's actually more traffic today than there was before the pandemic. And so I think a lot of people are looking at these sort of multimodal situations and solutions. And one of the interesting things is, even though there's more traffic region-wide, in DC, our downtown has not come back the way it used to. It used to be on a, afternoon during the work week, you just see tons of cars and commuter buses and all that kind of stuff clogging the streets of downtown. It doesn't look like that anymore. A lot of people work from home. And so one of the things that's really opened up in the city is multimodal transportation options. E-bikes, scooters, they become incredibly popular, and it's actually really easy to get around downtown now because there's not all the cars, kind of like that might hit you. So that's one of the things the city's really jumped into is adding e-bikes, and we're actually looking to find ways to charge them with solar panels, which is kind of cool. We're going to be piloting that hopefully soon, and just looking at these different options for how we can integrate this stuff into the network. And I think it presents an opportunity to kind of, adjust how we've been living and make some of these improvements to people's lives that, and do these kind of big projects that Morteza was talking about. I think it's an exciting time.
I cannot let you guys both use the word multimodal and not let Emily jump in with a multimodal sort of discussion point. I know you've looked at different ways to both broaden how SEPTA appeals to people, but also make it more customizable for the users of that. And certainly there is a large amount of risk in that. You got a group like BMW that obviously is looking at multiple transportation technologies and how that fits within their schema. So Emily, why don't you kick us off with some of the things SEPTA is doing from a multimodal perspective, and then Boris will bring it over to you as to kind of what you guys are considering as sort of the leaders in the pack or the trends that are coming forward. Ma'am?
So from a multimodal perspective, I would say our biggest thing is that we just released the micromobility playbook, which is looking at, we don't control the bike service that we have, the Indigo bike service that we have in Philadelphia. Scooters are not legally allowed. Personal scooters are, but the Lime scooters that we have all over here are not allowed in Pennsylvania as well. But we want to make sure that we make SEPTA as accessible as possible to all people and how they get there. So the launch of our micromobility playbook is pretty huge because during COVID, we just kind of put the kibosh on all of that and said, there's no connection. You can't bring your electric bikes on our services. You can't bring you have to take your child out of the stroller to get on our buses, which is, as a mother who often took her children on buses in strollers, it's a huge inconvenience. So really the big thing that we pushed is trying to figure out how to better connect with things like e-bikes and safety and security around that. And we just launched that actually Friday on the Zero Car Day or Zero Emission. There's like 2 days in a row, Zero Emission Day and then Zero Car Day. And we launched it over that. And that's been a huge focus for us, just again, to make the getting from point A to point B more seamless. And we're exploring other kind of ways of connecting to other modes. We're also launching a new mobile app, which is making navigating our system a little bit easier. It's part of our bigger wayfinding process. We also launched a new beta website. So it's a big time at SEPTA right now. We've got a lot of exciting things that we're deploying. But we're also looking strategically at things like how does our bus route serve our community now? We are reevaluating our bus routes for the first time in 60 years collectively. And really kind of streamlining that, recognizing that we have a $250 million deficit this upcoming year once the COVID funds are gone. That's huge. We're not as huge as, say, WMATA's, but it's still going to drastically impact our services, and we really want to make sure that we're not operating more vehicles than we need to, right? So that'll cut at last count, that'll cut our buses down by 200, so going from approximately 1,400 buses in our fleet to 1,200 buses over the next few years. And then we're also upgrading our trolleys, so making them more ADA accessible. And then we have our reimagining regional rail, so just improving our services on our rail as well. So we're doing a lot to really kind of meet the customer where they're at in terms of the means of transportation that they want.
Sweet.
Yeah, happy to chime in. But I got to be clear, we are the independent investment arm of BMW, so
yes,
I cannot speak on behalf of BMW. But I can tell you what we look at and what we do to enable similar goals and aims. So we are looking at this from an ecosystem perspective. And fun fact, going back to Emily's remarks, we actually led an investment in a company called Zoom, you may have heard of, which is essentially taking old school bus industry, making it multimodal. So you could have vans, you could have vehicles, your traditional passenger vehicles, and then trying to make this all electric. So this company was founded by a lady who got frustrated with the whole school bus system. She was a product manager at eBay. She quit her job. She went back to Stanford, did the design thinking and iterations, and then identified the product market fit, and then scaled. So now they took over the whole West Coast. Hopefully they're taking over a bit more on the East Coast. So what we realized is that when you replace the old school buses and their routes, you can reach mid or low double-digit savings from the number of vehicles being utilized. That also has got huge repercussions for the cost base, especially if you consider the fact that there's a massive shortage for school bus drivers. So all of a sudden, you create a system where schools can actually save money while parents have got access to cutting-edge technology. Like, if you order Uber, you see where Uber is. If you order pizza, you see where pizza is. But in the old school transportation system, you need to call the schools up to understand where your kids are. So all of a sudden, you got the Silicon Valley-style technology-first iteration approach to some traditional problems. And when we see those, we get excited about the impact potential. And frankly, when we think about innovation, the best markets to go after are the ones that are not sexy. The ones that are interesting are the ones that are archaic, that are massive, And typically, you got oligopolic structure, and people think it's a really bad place to start a startup.
I want to jump from that actually and leverage in some of the things Morteza said about communities being able to see where that innovation opportunity is and then to actually use it to go for an advance in technology or go for a transformation of an aspect of the network that cities use. So for Emily and Thomas, when you look at doing something completely different, as Morteza was saying, and breaking that stereotype of the government has awesome engineers and awesome processes, but now we need to take a wee bit of risk. And Emily, I think you mentioned risk earlier. So what's your process for that? And quite frankly, I know there are challenges on that in most city halls. I didn't survive one of them. And how have you all dealt with that? And Emily, we'll start with you and then on Thomas.
Jokingly, I say a little prayer. No. It's always, my biggest thing is finding my champions. Honestly, it's finding the people who I've built a relationship of trust with, who are willing to kind of stand beside me when I say this is a bit risky, but we can minimize it in this way by doing these things. I'm currently actually navigating a very what SEPTA would say is a risky process. We're looking at transitioning some of our buses to battery electric during the vehicle overhaul. And so retrofitting them to a battery electric kit and eventually a fuel cell battery kit. And there's a lot of risk in that, right? Is the cost too much? How do we fund it? How do we have the workforce to do this? Why don't we just purchase new buses? Then we can extend the life, that has a longer life, and whatnot. But for me, this is a very valuable project because one, again, we don't know what the landscape is going to be like as every transportation authority starts to transition their vehicles. The demand on battery electric buses is going to be huge. We're already seeing delays in delivery of fuel cell buses. We have a 10-bus fuel cell pilot that we're looking to launch, but we've already had to push the start back because of the delay in delivery. But again, for this, there's a workforce development component that's really attractive. Philadelphia is the largest poorest city in the United States. 25% of our population lives at or below federal poverty level. So to me, there's an opportunity to create jobs that allow for reskilling and upskilling and economic mobility in my city. It allows for a quicker transition. We've targeted 2040 to transition our entire fleet to zero-emission vehicles. That's a really aggressive target, especially looking at the landscape. Right now, if we were to start procuring battery electric buses, they wouldn't come online until 2028. That leaves us 12 years, which we could theoretically do, but we could also, try it and kind of spread out the risk, right? We're not just relying on purchasing new vehicles. And so for me, the process has been, okay, who are my champions internally? Who can I rely on? Who has the knowledge that I need? Because I always joke, I have a peanut butter schmear knowledge of city systems, right? My background is a variety. If anybody has ever looked at my resume, I've kind of taken a zigzag approach. It hasn't been really linear. So I pull in the experts, and I need to know who can talk to the operations side of things, who can talk to the bus buying side of things, and kind of create that tight group. And that's been the way that I've moved forward projects, both when I was the Smart Cities Director at the City of Philadelphia, where we got, in my 2.5 years there, we got 14 pilot projects moving, which was pretty good given that my budget was around $125,000 a year. And who can be my partner on the vendor side, who's willing to kind of sit at the table with us, absorb some of that risk, but also realize that it's an R&D partnership. Nothing's going to come out perfect on the first run. We're going to iterate on it, but we have the need, and they need us to test out the technology. And so kind of creating that cohort has been really the way that I've been able to move things forward.
Can I chime in on that? How
Yeah,
some
sure.
tech
Of course,
companies
of
could
course,
play
of
a
course.
key role in this whole transformation is obviously, as you get more and more battery development, we are seeing this dollar per kilowatt hour cost going down. And today, as we speak, total cost of ownership for electric buses are significant, right, when you compare it with the diesel. But we're coming to a point where it's going to be no-brainer in the very short term, where it makes so much sense to buy it. It has to financially make sense. That's the lens we look at it typically. And then you also have, all of a sudden, new revenue streams, just like Morteza mentioned. V2G is going to be an opportunity there because the grid, as we have, is another archaic infrastructure in place that may not be able to answer all of our EV needs. So therein lies an opportunity for electric school buses to put the batteries, electrons back to the grid and power it. and create new revenues that did not exist in the past.
Thomas?
Yeah, I would just add, and I'm glad you brought up the electrical grid, because I think that, we did a study of DC's electrical grid for meeting our electrification goals, and sort of broadly speaking, the network has capacity out to 2032, to add, a significant amount of new load, but 2032 is actually not that far away. And if you don't start, thinking about how you're rebuilding stuff now, then, all of a sudden there's a problem that you don't want to have. And I think that you brought up risk, and I think it's all about managing risk, right? It's not about not taking risks. You have to take risks, and too often I think in government people can be focused on the risk that they think that they're taking, but there's also the risk of not acting, right? There's the risk of not moving forward, of not addressing the problem that's ahead of you. So I think that reframing that and breaking things up into pieces and looking at the problem, getting the information, I think that all helps you manage that risk appropriately.
The way you're smiling and giggling,
Yeah.
jump in there, brother.
I just want to mention two projects that I think people might be interested to hear about. There are more than two projects, but two concepts. One is we have financed 3 bus maintenance facilities for electric buses for counties in California. They have a mandate, I believe it's 2032, if that you're mentioning, that they have to switch all to electric buses. I may not remember the date correctly, but they can go through a transition phase over 10, 12 years and bleed. Bleeding is because you have 2 sets of buses, diesel and electric. You need to have 2 sets of crew, 2 sets of maintenance facilities. Like, just think about how expensive that is, how inefficient it is. Or you can finance it, go through that whole process in less than 10 or 12 years, maybe in 2, 3, 4 years. So they have decided to go through the process much faster and cut on bleeding. That's one example. The other interesting project that we are working on, and now we haven't financed this project yet, they're talking to us about it, is when you switch to electric buses, what happens? With diesel, you have a lot of pollution, whether it's air pollution or sound pollution. You cannot do anything around that site. The bus maintenance facility, your bus depot, it's gonna be in the worst part of your town, and nothing else is gonna happen around it because it's not a nice area. But with diesel, you don't have that. You don't have air pollution and you don't have sound pollution. You can technically build on top of your bus maintenance facility or bus depot. And there are cities that are dealing with homelessness issue or with high price of housing. There's perfect opportunity to build public housing or low-income housing just around it, especially when land is so expensive. So those are just examples of how people are actually turning risk into an opportunity, turning an obligation into something that actually is going to generate value for them, additional value. And I'm sure there are more examples than that, but those two just came to my mind because we were recently working on them.
Makes sense to me. So here's the last thing. The reason we saved this bit for the end of the panel is we wanted to get everybody we possibly could inside the door so we can lock the door, and I can tell you all what the actual price of admission for MOVE is. And it ties right back to where we introduced this panel. We are all about literally changing the world while you're here. And to do that, much like these awesome panelists have talked about, it's iterative, and you got to start somewhere. So everybody who is attending this conference gets to make a MOVE pledge. And this is not something that you can just print on the wall and just stick there because it came out of a really cool book that you read, probably by Jimmy Buffett, and a witty saying of some sort. It's not that. It is a concrete thing that the next time we meet, either in London for MOVE London, or back here in Austin or Kansas City, Cormac, for next year, when we meet back at MOVE America, that you've done one concrete thing that you are pledging to today that over the course of the next year is going to happen. For me, I am absolutely going to get together the better part of about 30 cities. I hope to get it started next week. Right now we're at 25. To figure out the 5G infrastructure that's going to support autonomy. And by the end of this time next year, I pledge that the Cities Today Institute is going to get out a report which is going to talk about what cities need to provide for partners, and quite frankly, what those partners need from the cities, so that we can actually come to an agreement and begin working on that infrastructure problem that, I mean, criminy, we're going to talk about this in about the next 2 minutes. We've been talking about this since 2015. We got to get off our duffs and do it. And so I pledge to get out a report that's going to guide that by the time that we meet at this event next year. So we're going to start at that end, come down this, actually no, Emily Hates going first. Thomas, we're going to start with you. We'll end with Emily. What's your MOVE pledge?
So our local utility has proposed a bunch of incentive programs to do vehicle electrification, to support vehicle electrification. And I pledge to give our input on that, which I think will help move it forward at the Public Service Commission, which should be a big part of helping to get electric vehicles in DC.
When I joined Bureau, on average, we're closing $2-3 billion a year in terms of loans. Today that I'm talking to you, because of the amazing job that the team has done, we have more than $50 billion worth of loans going through the process with us. I know we have done a great job getting the word out there, getting people excited, starting that movement, but my pledge is to make sure that they get to the finish line.
Love that. Sir?
I'm happy to go. Thank you. So there's 2 things I'm going to pledge to do. One is work to get more women talking in this space. So creating a women leadership, smart cities, technology space, because I think we need more women up here. Nothing against this great panel. And I know we were supposed to have another female up here, but she couldn't join us. And then the other one is I think I really believe strongly in this, this kit for transitioning to battery electric or fuel cell. And so in the next year, I hope that we actually have it started, and it can be something that can then be shared with other transportation authorities to help accelerate the transition.
Awesome. Sir?
Yeah, I pledge working together with everybody in the ecosystem, with just like we're similar to the valuable panelists over here, as well as startups and partners to make. I do believe electrification is going to be first before automation of driving down the road.
I'm cool with that. I'm good with that.
Earlier, yeah. I'm a bit more bearish on autonomous driving, but way more bullish on electrification, personally. Maybe being in Silicon Valley, we've seen so many failures. But yeah, my pledge is helping electrify, have everything surrounding us as soon as possible, but working some of the best entrepreneurs out there and amazing city officials, state officials, because it takes a village, it takes a lot of cooperation, and I pledge to have an open mind.
Well, I will first tell you that they were not failures. They were opportunities to learn. And over the course of the last 40 minutes, I've learned a ton sitting up here with y'all. So thank you all. If you all would join me in thanking this awesome panel as they move out and go do about their awesome day. Make sure you grab them today.